Right, so let's go back to our earlier conversation. Via Zoom, we're joined by the Chief Executive Officer for the Soul City Institute, Phinah Kodisang. Phinah, welcome back. We were experiencing some technical issues. It seems it's been sorted. Earlier on, you spoke about the contributing factors to this crisis regarding teenage pregnancy rates in South Africa. And we were trying to assess with the information and data available why there's still an increase this year, about 150,000 increase. I wonder if we could speak to the vulnerabilities at this point, the disparities in demographics between rural and cities. Is family structure also something that comes to the fore? Help us really understand what we're getting wrong.
Where we are going wrong is that we try to isolate issues. And most of the time in isolating issues, we settle on problematizing young women and how, it's a behavioral issue that they end up pregnant. But we are not addressing the systemic failures, because if we are not addressing rape and you were just showing, a victim there, a survivor of rape who got pregnant due to rape, if we are not addressing the crisis of rape in our country, of course, the numbers will keep going up. If we are not addressing the issue of access to reproductive health services, the teenage pregnancy will keep going up. If we are not addressing issues in the homes, where young people are not even given an opportunity to communicate with their parents about what is happening with them, what they are going through, and just the general normalization of, rape and violation in our country, our numbers will just keep going up. So we need to say, how are we addressing rape? How are we addressing access to services? But also when we talk to young women, we also say, what is the responsibility you have? Because if these services are there, you have a responsibility as a young person to go and access them, So we need to speak to young people, but we also need to speak to the system so that the system can fix the issues that are there in the system that are creating this problem that we call teenage pregnancy. And again, I think we must also call it what it is, because not all pregnancies are teenage pregnancies. Some of them are statutory rape.
Yes.
So we need to isolate the numbers, which is the point I was trying to make earlier, to say, if we look at them, in isolation as just teenage pregnancy and not break them down to say how many of these are actually due to rape and how many of these are actually due to young people not accessing services, then we will begin to see a picture, and maybe our response then will be tailored to address the real issue.
No, absolutely. It's a very valid point you're making about reframing the discussion and really looking at not the behavioral issues, but again, like you said, the systemic issues, which have ripple effects and continue to affect the future of South Africa. There's subsequently a trend where we're seeing high dropout rates from school as well. And that must also affect, the young women, perhaps their children, their economic status as well. And I wonder if at all there is any support for pregnant teenagers at schools around the country. Is enough being done on that front then?
So the Department of Basic Education has a policy. It's called the Management of Learner Pregnancy, where they try to address the very same issues we are talking about, and how when a learner is pregnant, instead of them dropping off school, because I saw in one of your inserts, the girl was talking about how she ended up dropping out of school. The support that is offered within the schooling system needs to be unpacked clearly so that we know what is that support, what does it look like, how does the young person who finds themselves pregnant and being a learner, still benefit from accessing schools. But we know that the communities push back, because you have parents who say, my child will not be in a school with someone who's pregnant. And because we have given so much power to school governing bodies, sometimes they operate outside of what the law and the policy says, because they can create their own school guidelines and school policies, sometimes which are not favorable. So we need to work at So addressing the whole system, I think is the point I'm trying to make, that we cannot just isolate issues, But when we address the issue from the root causes to also looking at how do we create an enabling environment where perpetration continues to happen, where we don't call out behaviors of teachers who impregnate learners, where we don't see any, punitive measures being taken. We just know of the numbers, but we don't also close the loop in saying of the 2,300, if they were due to statutory rape, this is the number of arrests that have been made. So that gap creates a problem, and it perpetrates violations of young children and young women in this.
Phinah, what about the issue of teenage suicide in relation to high teenage pregnancy rates at this point? Mental health, not being able to cope, perhaps looking to suicide as a solution. Are there concerns on that front at this point as we're speaking as well?
There are concerns because there are cases that we've heard of where, not having anywhere to run to, the option that young people take is to commit the suicide, because society, again, is very hard on young women. We don't see the same energy invested in calling boys out, because some of the young girls who are pregnant are impregnated by their peers. And we put so much pressure on young girls and not the same, even corrective, pressure on boys. And so that creates stigma, that creates, as you say, mental health issues. And some young women, out of the support that, they feel they are not getting, or the lack of support that they don't get, opt for suicide, which we could avoid if we were really intentional and proactive in creating a safe environment, even when the young people find themselves, pregnant.
Phinah, it seems like a lot more needs to be done, and there are a lot more questions than answers at this point. Also, the very crux of the matter, how we frame things, is something that we also have to relook at, perhaps from a media perspective and a government perspective in trying to tackle the problem. So thank you for your time and for your inputs. Let's see if this is going to yield results in terms of mitigating against this problem, that teenage crisis in South Africa. Alarming stats emerging at this point. Phinah Kodisang from the Seoul City Institute, Chief Executive Officer there, really unpacking on some of those contributing factors and the way forward.